On 3rd October 2020, the Union Ministry of Education released the guidelines for reopening of schools and colleges during Unlock 5. The decision of reopening educational institutes have been left in the hands of states and the union territories. According to the guidelines, students can go to school if they have a written permission of the parent or guardian. However, if a student opts for online classes, schools and coaching institutes must make sure that online learning is encouraged. For universities, the ministry said that only PhD or post graduation in science and technology students can visit the campus as they have streams that require experimental or lab work. The Ministry of Home Affairs issued guidelines clearly mentioning that states and union territories can take decisions over the reopening of schools and coaching institutes after October 15th in a graded manner. However, many states and union territories have decided to keep the educational institutions shut until the end of the month, following the rise in COVID-19 cases across the country. The World Health Organization has guidelines around how schools should ideally open. It includes testing children through the day to be able to be on the top of the health of the students. But it also says that each local area must take into account the challenges and the epidemiological situation. Krishangi Sinha, Democracy News Live, New Delhi.
Good evening. You're watching Democracy News Live. You're watching the show It Matters. Today, we're discussing another very important thing, important for a lot of people, because it's about your children. When they go back to school, are they going to be safe? What is it going to take? Schools have now been shut for months, all the way from March. And the Education Ministry has announced that we can reopen the schools starting October 15th. But it'll be dependent on a lot of issues around state administration can make a call. Schools themselves can make a call, is it safe or not? And we have to figure out, are schools safe? Is it okay to open them? What is it going to take? We're joined by an extremely well-qualified panel. Ms. Gowri Ishwaran, she used to be the principal of Sanskriti School. Now she is a advisor to the Shiv Nadar Foundation, as well as she runs a foundation of her own for global education and leadership. Thank you very much for joining me for the show, ma'am. Also joining me is Shashi Banerjee. She's the principal of Shiv Nadar School in Noida, and again, one of very respected schools today. And also joining us is Rita Kaul. Rita is the director of Millennium Group of Schools. Thank you, all of you, for joining us. Gowri, ma'am, let me start by asking you, how much of a challenge is it, as we open our schools?
I think it's a challenge that's difficult to describe, something that we are before. And it's not, we always, connect schools with content and grades, but it's going to be something completely different when the school reopens now. Apart from the fact that we have jumped into the technology world, to me, the concern is not so much to me, the concern is the kind of that this enforced lockdown and being shut will definitely have children, especially on the younger ones. They may not show it so clearly, it may not be evident to you, but it will definitely be there. And I think teachers need to be prepared to deal with that and not focus so much on the content issue. The second thing, which will be for the management and principals of schools, is how are they going to keep the children safe? How will the social distancing and wearing of masks work? Should we call all children together, or should there be staggered approach? Should some classes come on one day and the others on another? Should one section be divided into two? How are we going to deal with all this? And the teachers need to realize, and I think the heads of schools have their job cut off in getting the teachers ready to come back to a school situation, a classroom situation so different from before. You see, we have been pitchforked into technology use thanks to online classes and online schools. But at the same time, they also have to continue with person-to-person meeting in the classroom. But it's not going to be the same, because now when the children come back, as a teacher in the classroom, my role is now going to transition to that of being a facilitator and a mentor. I'm no longer going to be the arbitrator of all knowledge and information. We will be the co-partners with the children in their learning process. So you see how many things have changed. Teachers have to change their attitude. Schools have to function and readapt their structure. The curriculum needs to change, because I think the NEP here has played an important role in emphasizing the importance of problem solving and critical thinking. So it's a 360-degree change and difference that's going to be. It's not going to be the same school that
Well,
you are going to
very,
go
very
back.
important point, ma'am. I think, ma'am's, you've touched on some very important issues. That one, technology has made us change, the whole structure of the school itself and how the student relates to the teachers and what happens. So I think a far more, well-rounded look at how education is going to unfold. But another very important part, obviously, which you've raised, ma'am, is that health parameters, safety concerns are going to be huge, and we will certainly have to watch out for that. Let me bring in Mrs. Banerjee into this here. Mrs. Banerjee, you run a school, and very fairly a prestigious large school out of Noida, India. Could you tell me the kind of SOPs as you look at opening the school? What are the kind of SOPs you're putting in place?
So, thank you for this question and this conversation. And as Mrs. Ishwaran shared, that the concerns are not merely about resuming school as it was, but what is that new school going to look like? I'd like to share with you that right in March, we were one of the first schools to close, and the reason was that you first have to make meaning of the cataclysmic change that suddenly hit us. It took some time for the whole world, and never before has the whole world come together to solve this kind of a, I won't call it a problem, a challenge that was posed to the education world. So the standard operational procedures have been laid out by the WHO. There have been different regulatory guidelines from different countries, nations, MHRD. All that is fine. But what happens is that this is not something that people were prepared for, and hence the kind of guidelines are also shifting goalposts, as you have seen. There were directives for the schools to reopen in August, then in September, now in October. The reason is that, rightly so, people are concerned not so much about compliance alone, but of the safety and security and the health related challenges for the youngest of all children. So we have a back to school, when things like this happen, first thing is you open your doors to the whole world to hear what the Swiss Regulatory Act says, or what the Israeli schools did, what the schools in England are doing. And many schools opened and then they closed down and then they opened again. So there is a lot of learning available by the people who are right there in the front line. And in India, as in many other countries, we have different models of schools. And if I start with a case study of just Shiv Nadar School, where the DNA itself is, there is a programming of evolutionary curriculum. It changes because we have been talking about the VUCA world. It's an overstated thing, but the volatile, ambiguous, complex environment is now more to be seen as, do we have the vision, the understanding, the ability to collaborate, and the agility to be able to put together a design. And here is where, if a school has been working towards an adaptable, evolving curriculum, which is what the national curriculum way back in 2005 proposed, and the new NEP also proposed, and so do the schools world over, moving from content to process moving from product to process, moving from pedagogy to heutagogy. Heutagogy is self-directed learning, and technology makes it possible. So this is to talk about those schools that have the wherewithal. But I think all of us know of the digital divide that is taking place. For us, the first thing to do was to look after the 100 students who come from villages under the right to education, who do not have neither resources nor the learning. So there is a whole professional development which is happening for teachers, but also alongside for the for the most critical partners, that is the parents. And the parents are collaborating hugely. So the SOPs are, there is a quadrant: safety, security, health guidelines. Is teaching and learning going to be effective in the environment? What should the design be? Does the financial resource pool of the school allow for this kind of a design? What kind of a design should be made? And is assessment of teaching and learning something that we are going to look at with a different lens, because it will not be the same as it
Sure,
was before.
sure,
So in
sure.
this quadrant, there is an SOP laid out, and I'm sure every school, every government, every state is looking very closely at the context they are operating from, if that
Ma'am,
answers your
when
question.
you absolutely it does, ma'am. And when you're discussing the issue, you're obviously looking at a much larger area of, looking at an overall development of a school. But I think one of the first thing that comes to every parent's mind today, as they let their child step out of their home, every parent's most prized possession is their children at some level. And when they're letting the kids go to school, the first thing is, will my kid come back home safe? Will he come back infected? What is going to happen? And I think that's one of the concerns everybody is kind of first looking at. And I know teachers and professionals such as yourself and Gowri ma'am and Rita ma'am, who's joined us now, are all looking at these issues. But one of the things which we saw, and I ran a show about 2 days ago around this COVE band. Now, this band, what it does is it gives you all the parameters of health, including your SpO2, which also puts out the idea of. So there are many schools who are using devices, wearables such as these, to identify if there are any students which are at risk. And I'm sure as you go forward, because the WHO is saying you have to take the temperature and understand what the health is of the child 3 times a day, it's going to be a fairly, a kind of a really systematized approach in dealing with this. Let me bring in Mrs. Kaul here. Mrs. Kaul, please, would you tell me, in terms of your school, have you looked at a certain strategy around how, when the schools open, are there SOPs that you're putting in place which will help open the schools?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for asking me that, Ru. I think all the principals and across, not only in India, across the world, principals and management are worried about it. And all of us are going through, as Shashi said rightly, through the SOPs from MHRD, from UNICEF, from WHO, and we are making our own guidelines too, because the chain of schools. If you're running this chain of schools across India, then each and every school has its own need, and the gentry you are dealing with, they all have their own expectations. So even if we started the schools, the administration started coming, all the administrators are there, the accountants and office people. But what do you do? Because last week I know that two of my in charges in one of the schools got COVID, and the entire office had to shut down. So, despite taking those precautions in the school, I don't think we are still ready. All of us are ready, because you don't know which child, which teacher, which administration person is coming from what background, whom have they met, because the number of cases in India is still it's not controlled. It's not that we have come down. And with this large number of cases every day, I think we are not being practical, and we should not be opening our schools even if we have SOPs. And as Shashi said, there's a digital divide, yes, for infra, but there is a divide also in sustenance of whatever. Just about 30% or 25% schools can take care of that. But if you really come to low budget schools or middle socioeconomic schools, I don't think the kind of SOPs which are required, we are ready for it. So I think, and another thing, that the survey, the parental survey, which is very important, and even in schools like ours, parents did not agree. The survey which we had, it was just like 2 or 3 parents agreeing to send their children to school, and that too for seniors. So it's going to be a very hectic thing for teachers to have the blended learning, even if they follow that, to conduct a class for 3 or 4 children in a school and then go online for rest of the classes. It's going to be very hectic. So practically, I don't see that we are ready, even if we have SOPs in place.
I think Ms. Call is making a very good point. First of all, the SOPs that have been laid out by the WHO around the surveys, and then obviously different countries have laid out their own, guidelines. They're very detailed. And then beyond that, if imagine, let's say you have 1,000-student school, and you have to take the health vitals of 1,000 children thrice every day, and then talking about human error that may be involved in doing it, is going to be a massive task. Beyond that, contact tracing, knowing where the child's come from, who they're going to meet in school. Now, again, taking the example of some US school districts, what they've done, obviously they can afford it, is, they put out a band where every student wears it 24/7, and they know if the student takes it off. Based on that band, they get kind of the statistics, even the SpO2 levels. And if they, in the morning, they realize that the SpO2 levels are not what it is at, then they would basically turn around and say that you are not, ready to come to school today. Your health doesn't look okay. So I think these are the ideas. Ma'am, Ms. Ishwaran, let me bring you in here. In terms of, do you think schools are ready in India yet? And I'm not just talking about a few good, wealthy schools. I know some wealthy schools will be able to, put in things like this in place. But let's talk about the larger, landscape. Do you think we are there yet that we can open the schools?
Personally, I really don't think we are there as yet, because I'm looking at all the schools that we have in rural areas and in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, where, as you just mentioned, they don't have the infra facilities that the bigger schools have. I think we need to wait, because in India, like in many countries, you had one wave, then it went down and it came back. We just don't seem to have had any relief at all. The virus has been on the go. All the way through from March, and I until we see a flattening of the curve and until we see the cases going down and continuing to keep down, I don't think it's a good idea to open schools as yet. But it's a double-edged sword, because without schools, the mental health of the children is getting impacted. With the children are social animals, and they grow and learn and are nurtured through socialization. So denying them that also has its downside. So it's a question of, between the devil and the deep sea. So there's no really right answer, but left to myself, I would think, now that we have been closed for so long and we have already gone into October and the Dashera and Diwali holidays are around the corner, maybe it's not a bad idea to wait till January. Hopefully, we see the flattening of the curve by then. Hopefully, by then the number of cases come down. We are able to think of ways in which we can keep the children safe. Maybe call one class a day, or we attend only to the 10th and the 12th classes. You're talking about children being innovative and creative. I think we as educationists have to learn to be innovative and creative. But I think looking at January is not a bad idea, but it comes with its attendant mental health issues.
Ma'am, you make a very good point, ma'am. And the other day I was again discussing with two very eminent people in the area of the vaccine, Mrs. Kang and Jeremy Kim. The vaccine is not going to be around till next October, really, a decent vaccine.
Yes.
And the curve in a country like India ain't going to flatten, because we've seen temperature doesn't change that, and we know that the community spread is ongoing, which means the only way to keep our population safe would be social distancing, which again, has to happen using technology or using, restrained by people, which doesn't seem to be the case. I was in Uttar Pradesh yesterday. I was traveling from deep inside a rural town, and I saw everybody out there. Nobody was wearing any masks. People were crowded one over the other. There was a vehicle which was filled with some 30 people in one small little vehicle. It's called a Chota Hathi in India, but it really is a small little pickup. And I was shocked. I said, what are we talking about social distancing in these cities when the community spread, which is happening at that level, is going to be so large? So I think the community step's not going to stop. So if there is a way, it's going to be early detection monitoring. Mrs. Banerjee, if it comes down to the idea that you have to reopen the schools, and even if it's January, I don't think it's going to change from away from next August or October. Honestly, all the way from now till next October, pretty much I see the curve only going up and not coming down. If that becomes the issue, then what would give you the confidence to open your school?
So, Rohit, what we've been doing, and I'm sure many educators around, we've been designing different models, option one, option two, option three, of which the hybrid learning model stands out to be the most practical, in which you can have live stream. Again, we'll have to talk about opening schools in terms of the different contexts. And I will first start with our own context of Shiv Nadar School, where while we have the neighborhood children, as we call them, who are the economically weaker section, but it is our responsibility to see that they have the device, the tool, the mechanism, and the training. That's one responsibility. Having said that, for all the other children, there will be a few, because especially for primary school and early child care and education, schools are the pivotal point, a very critical part of the economic activities of the society. As all of us know, for what kind of parameters are going to be laid down for businesses, for entrepreneurs, for people working in the public and the private sector. There are countries that have started connecting as pods, where they have 14, 15 children in one residential area being looked after by one set of parents who take turns. So it's like carpooling, literally. So you will have a set of parents who are taking care of those 14 neighborhood, their own tower or whatever residential area they are in. They have to devise means, because their economic activities are not going to be indefinitely postponed. And school becomes, especially for the 3.5 to 9, 10 year old, is a place where the parent can safely keep the child who is learning, is engaged, and they can carry on with their bread earning also, without really worrying about the child's well-being. Now, in the absence of something like this, there will be very different kinds of mechanisms and coping mechanisms that even the working world will have to come out with, not just schools. You will have to have offices which have to change the way, whether it's the public sector or the private sector. And if this is, as you're rightly saying, right up till October, and then have we forgotten when there was the air impurities in the air, school used to get closed every now and then. So schools that were really a little ahead of times and thinking on their feet already established certain learning management systems, and they were already doing classes without loss of teaching learning hours, and they were a little more prepared, I would say, without really saying that some were more prepared than the others. But yes, so if you are so we have been really harping upon the VUCA world in all educational forums. You will see education 4.0, sustainable development goals. I think pandemic just pushed us ruthlessly into a no option environment to do it. And if we don't learn from it and don't change some of the designs of how we hold our PTMs, how we do some of the things which are best left to machine learning. All that needs to be done by machines can be done by machines. All that social, emotional, which my worthy seniors and colleagues have been talking about, that you have to have a school for that social, emotional well being. Call it by any name. It's a learning environment where people of the same age group, the same kind of disposition, will listen to different stories coming from different backgrounds and therefore build humanity forward. So, in the absence of that activity, I was listening to some heads of schools from Israel. Children that have come back are showing different behaviors. There is difference in the vocabulary, in the way they are responding to the environment around them. So a lot of changes which are slowly happening in that mind that is growing with this kind of stimulus. Educators have to really prep themselves up into reading more about anthropomorphy, which is, are we converting AI into biological frames? Can it be done? We might have learned
Sure.
from the bird to fly, but the mechanism of how the aeroplane flies is different from the way originally the bird started flying.
Sure.
So
Very good
a
point.
lot cannot just be transferred from the way we were running schools to an environment which is, we call it the connected learning environment,
Sure.
not just
Sure.
virtual or blended. We
Sure.
need to know where our learner is. We need
Sure.
to know
Sure.
where the teacher is. So it starts from that basic level. And I'm sure
Sure.
there are designs. There are pods 16 to a group with washrooms and availability of entry exit points, so that even if one person is unwell or gets infected, you don't have to close the whole school. You have a
Sure.
16-member pod which is taken care of, and all that is available. But
No,
as both Mrs. Kaul and Mrs. Ishwaran said, we shouldn't rush and hurry unnecessarily, because why are schools
well,
there?
no,
So that
I'm with
children,
you. Ma'am, you're absolutely
you
right.
know,
We have to be
and if you're
ready.
compromising learning and teaching in just trying to, take temperature,
I'm with you.
accelerate, so
I'm with you,
that
ma'am.
that
First of all, I think you make a very good point. We should not hurry. Zishwaran as well made that point very, very strongly. We should take it easy before we decide to. But I think there is enough technology around today, and I think utilizing the technology. For example, some of this technology that you see will actually even do social distancing for you. So if you are anywhere 6 feet within the space, these variables actually will buzz and tell you are too close. It will also tell you, for example, contact tracing. It will check all of that. So I think these technologies exist. Mrs. Call, let me bring you in here. Do you think the world, and especially India, is going to go take the technology route as we go forward, or do you think it's we're going to use a more traditional way as we move forward?
Have no choice. You have to go technical. You have to follow technology. And here I have a point. I wish our government had helped us, by the government, right? And in India, there's hardly any support when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to, like when Shashi was saying that the EWS category students could be benefiting from such a school where you have resources. How about 80% schools where children don't have any resources? So, technology is the only way out, but we need to look at the resources that they are available to the last child that is coming to school. And don't forget that it's very easy to have these devices where you say, okay, 6 feet distance, and that can be followed by adults, that can be followed by people who are conscious. How about a 3+ child, a 4+ child? You know how they are socially, how they are emotionally. Even if
Yeah.
we go in the corridors, they come running, hugging us. They want to hug us, even if they reach my legs, they're hugging the legs. So it's very difficult to control that age group, the pre-primary and the primary, and to make them understand. Yes, there are a number of things when we talk about the social emotional development. papers had to be like they got average out of it. So I knew that the adolescent children are going through a lot of uh, aggression and a lot of frustration. Then Sushant Singh Rajput case happened, and there were a number of students who were getting these ideas, of suicide. And we started taking the mental health counseling sessions in the morning for them. And I saw the changes which it brought to the adolescent group. Then for the smaller group, we started activities in the evening. Now we are having 6 to 7 activities every day. One day are cooking, and another they are art activity and painting activities, just to keep them involved and engaged in something creative. Because Gauri and Shashi, they're right that if children are not engaged emotionally and socially, they feel so frustrated. But then physical health, if you're not physically fit, you're not mentally fit. So that's a challenge for all of us. But I'm still saying that government needs to take a step ahead and look at those children, because those of us who have the infrastructure, even if the schools don't reopen this year, we can still manage, because we have the gadgets, we have the software, we have the assessments and the assignment, how we conduct it. All of our children, our teachers can reach out. What about those 70-75% students? How can they be, left behind? And technology would only be the answer, nothing else.
What an amazing, session, really. What all of these three pillars